All right. So now we've gotten through college. Now let's get into the career, Robert. So you did not start out as an investor. A lot of people believe that incorrectly. Robert Smith has spent his entire career as an investor. You had an entirely different career, and you were good at it and successful at it. You loved it. Talk to us about how you define success in your initial career.
Sure. I mean, I was a chemical engineer, and growing up and going through college, I started to realize the importance of even something today was the importance of an idea, something different, something new. And I thought the greatest thing in the world that you could ever do was come up with an idea that no one else had come up with, right, in the history of mankind. And so in focusing, I like areas called applied research and development, and earned a couple of U.S. and European patents in developing ideas and processes and things that no one else had come up with. And to me, I thought that was one of the greatest accolades, frankly, on the planet. And then one thing happened: a Black media publication called Black Enterprise started to really produce materials about Black business people. And me and a few of my fraternity brothers who were actually in Buffalo, New York, and other places at the time would read these, and we sit down and we talk about, well, who are these people on the covers of these magazines? People by the name of John Utendahl and Ray McGuire and Stan O'Neill and these sort of folks, and understanding what it is that they did and how they did it. And so we started to do our own research and trying to figure it out. And so the importance of seeing us, our images, who we were, and guys like Reginald Lewis comes on the scene and what he's doing. And it started to show us, to me in particular, I thought about my life as contribution in an intellectual capacity in the work that I did as an engineer, but I started to understand the importance of capital. I didn't understand what capital really meant because, no one in my neighborhood had capital.
Right.
Right. So I started to understand that. And so I went back to business school, got educated in that. And then, John in particular and Ray in particular helped me understand that the importance of capital and how it shapes communities and how it shapes, an opportunity set. And that's when I went off and joined Goldman Sachs in the M&A department. And I realized that in mergers and acquisitions in particular, think about it as the highest levels of capital structure. It's when, assets are exchanged between owners. It's board level discussions, it's CEO level discussions that occur, and it reshapes the way that capital is deployed and engaged across the planet. And I thought, man, that's a good place to really learn how this works. And go ahead. Sorry,
I'm so sorry. So you again successful in chemical engineering. You had great access to almost peer mentors in terms of Ray McGuire and John, a little bit ahead of you, but clearly guys that were in a different field that you respected and listened to. You get into the almighty Goldman Sachs, right? Generally regarded as the largest and most prestigious of the investment banks. You do extremely well there. I'm going to tell the story for you. You get the opportunity to go out to the West Coast, Silicon Valley. You open that office. You become one of their most prolific bankers in the enterprise software space. I know you made a lot of money there. I know you did well there, and I know you had a great lifestyle there. I want to get to this notion of why it wasn't good enough to just stay there, right? Where does the fire come to leave something so good?
Yeah. And, Bob, you and I have talked about this dozens of times. It's this whole idea of risk taking is free on the one hand, right? To first start off, one of the things that I will always thank John and Ray and others for is they made themselves available to me when I was asking kind of, uninformed questions.
Sure.
And they would take the time, I'm sure, and chuckle a little bit about these questions from this engineer who's asking about capital structures. How does this actually work? And why would they do that form of a deal to help me understand that a little bit better? I was invited to go out, like you said, to San Francisco by Goldman to, create what now became our tech group. I was our first kind of M&A person on the ground. And I, had a chance to engage with companies like, Apple Computer and Microsoft and, Texas Instruments and Hewlett Packard and little companies called Yahoo and eBay back in the early days of tech, and really started to understand more and more about how capital is leveraged and used in technology.
Yeah.
And then I started to think about a couple of my experiences as a engineer. One of the experiences in the early days when I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was actually implementing what was called a programmable logic controller into a production facility. So this is the introduction of computing technology into a plant. And
Yep.
done with that work, we, in essence, were able to increase the productivity of that plant by about 26%. And once you think about that, that's basically a whole shift.
Right.
Right. And just for people's explanation, when you're controlling a plant in analog, it kind of operates like this, right? Temperature goes up, you need to adjust it. Pressure goes down, you need to adjust it. But when you put a computer system in place, you're actually able to adjust it thousands of times a second in essence. Yep. So everything that was under the curve is waste. And if you can eliminate all that waste, that gives you more productivity. So it's high level, right? But what that shows you is the power of computing. And now computers are starting to be pushed, not just on in the plant, but now being pushed into the offices. So that same sort of efficiency, which is being implemented by, the McKinseys and the Bains and those sort of folks in the world, is now starting to hit the office. And the whole idea and the thought is, well, to what extent, if you actually now drive enterprise software, which is in this case, into the environments of businesses, how efficient can those businesses become, which created a massive uplift in earnings in the companies in the late 90s or in the early 90s, believe it or not. That's part of what the productivity and kept the interest rates down and inflation down. But even more importantly, how do you now run these businesses more efficiently as an investor? So when I started thinking about what the opportunity set is, I actually talked to my grandfather, God rest his soul. And he was like, Robert, why would you ever leave Goldman Sachs? He said, that's a great job. Why would you ever leave Goldman? And I said, Granddad, I said, there are very few African-American entrepreneurs. Very few, we knew about Reggie Lewis at the time. I said, but there's just very few. And I've learned some things that not a whole lot of people know how to do. And, don't you think it makes sense for me to go try and to take this risk? Now, of course, my grandfather grew up, he was born in 1915, Depression era, segregated life through most of his life, worked really hard. He said, but, what about the certainty of, and he and I spent a lot of time talking about this. And I said, Granddad, how would I feel if I don't take this risk? And ultimately, as a good, family and grandfather he said, grandson, you should go try. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the lesson that we, as African Americans, for so long we have been discouraged to try. To start our own businesses and to deal with the pain of that and the joy and the elation and the liberation of it. And that's what ultimately led me to say this is worth trying and worth doing and giving it all that I have and my best. And that's an important thing that I try to impart to, I have a wonderful once a month session with the Morehouse class of 2019, young men. And that's what we talk about is, okay, a whole range of things. But one is to try and to take some risk. They didn't have the debt that, fortunately, that I had graduating from college. But it's important that they go and look to see what they can do and how they can, express their best selves in some cases a business environment, in some cases a medical environment, and then look to serve their community effectively from that dimension. So that's why I left Goldman to go give it a shot.